My name is Minnie Foster, and I'm 68 years old. Yesterday, I stood in a divorce court and watched my husband Theodore's face turn pale as I played a video on the courtroom screen. A video showing him beating me, footage he had no idea I'd recorded. Theodore sat at the defendant's table with his attorney, confident and smug. He'd convinced himself that after 45 years of abuse, I was too broken, too forgetful, too scared to fight back in court. "Your Honor, my client's wife is elderly and confused," Theodore's attorney said. "She's making wild accusations about abuse that allegedly happened years ago. She has no proof. It's her word against his." Theodore nodded along, his face showing fake sympathy for his confused wife. That's when my attorney, Geneva Martinez, stood up and said the words that changed everything. "Your Honor, we have proof," Geneva said calmly. "Mrs. Foster has video evidence of the abuse. Multiple videos, in fact, recorded over the past 3 years using hidden cameras she installed in their home." Theodore's confident expression faltered. His attorney looked shocked. "Video evidence?" the judge asked, leaning forward with interest. "Yes, Your Honor," Geneva confirmed. "We'd like to play one of the videos for the court now." I watched Theodore's face as the bailiff dimmed the courtroom lights and my attorney connected her laptop to the projection screen. Theodore was shaking his head slightly, probably thinking there was no way I could have videos. I was too old, too technologically incompetent, too defeated to have figured out how to record him. He was wrong. The video began playing. The courtroom went silent as everyone watched footage from our living room 3 months ago. Theodore's voice filled the courtroom. "You stupid woman! You can't do anything right." Then the sound of a slap, my cry of pain. Theodore's hand visible in the frame, striking me across the face. I watched Theodore's face as he saw himself on that screen, saw the undeniable proof of what he'd done to me for 45 years. The color drained from his face. His mouth opened, but no words came out. His attorney scrambled through papers, looking panicked. "Your Honor, we weren't aware of any video evidence," the attorney started. "That's because your client thought his wife was too old and stupid to record him," Geneva interrupted. "He's been telling everyone, including his attorney, that Mrs. Foster is senile and forgetful. He thought she'd forgotten the beatings. He was wrong. She remembered everything, and she recorded it." The judge watched the video in silence, her expression growing increasingly stern as the footage showed Theodore shoving me against a wall, yelling inches from my face, calling me worthless. When the video ended, the judge turned to Theodore. "Mr. Foster, do you have anything to say?" Judge Opal Washington asked. Theodore looked like he might be sick. "That video it's taken out of context." "Out of context," the judge repeated. "Mr. Foster, I just watched you strike your wife across the face and shove her into a wall while calling her degrading names. What context makes that acceptable?" Theodore had no answer. But to understand how I ended up in that courtroom playing video evidence of my husband's abuse, and how Theodore made the fatal mistake of thinking I'd forgotten or forgiven the decades of violence, I need to take you back to the beginning. I met Theodore Foster in 1980 when I was 23 and he was 25. We met at a church social event, and Theodore seemed charming, attentive, and kind. "You have the most beautiful smile," Theodore told me on our first date. "I could look at you all day." I was flattered. Theodore was handsome, had a good job as an accountant, and seemed genuinely interested in me. We dated for 6 months before he proposed. "Minnie, I want to spend my life with you," Theodore said when he proposed. "I'll take care of you, protect you, love you forever." I said yes. We married 3 months later in 1981. I was 24 years old. The first time Theodore hit me was 6 months after our wedding. I'd burned dinner. The chicken was overcooked and dry. "What is this?" Theodore said, looking at the plate I'd set in front of him. "I'm sorry, the chicken got a little overdone," I said apologetically. "I was on the phone with my mother and lost track of time." "A little overdone," Theodore repeated, his voice rising. "It's like eating shoe leather. I work all day and this is what you serve me." I said I'm sorry, I repeated, feeling nervous. This was the first time I'd heard that edge in Theodore's voice. Sorry isn't good enough, Theodore said. Then, faster than I could process, he picked up the plate and threw it across the room. It shattered against the wall. I stood frozen, shocked. Clean it up, Theodore ordered, and make something else, something edible. I cleaned up the broken plate with shaking hands, apologizing repeatedly. Theodore sat in the living room watching TV, acting like nothing had happened. That night in bed, I told myself it was a one-time thing. Theodore had been stressed at work. I shouldn't have burned dinner. It was partially my fault. I didn't realize I was already making excuses for him, already sliding into the pattern of abuse that would define the next 45 years of my life. The second incident happened 3 months later. I'd gone to lunch with my sister Ruthie without telling Theodore first. Where were you? Theodore demanded when I came home. I had lunch with Ruthie, I said, just at the cafe downtown. You had lunch with Ruthie, Theodore repeated slowly. Did you ask my permission? I didn't think I needed permission to have lunch with my sister, I said, confused. That's when Theodore hit me for the first time, a hard slap across the face that made my ears ring. I stood there in shock, my hand on my burning cheek, unable to believe what had just happened. You're my wife, Theodore said coldly. You don't go anywhere without telling me first. Do you understand? I nodded, tears forming. Say it, Theodore demanded. Say you understand. I understand, I whispered. Good, Theodore said. Then he went back to reading his newspaper like nothing had happened. I stood in the kitchen touching my cheek, trying to process what had just occurred. My husband, the man who'd promised to love and protect me, had just hit me because I'd had lunch with my sister without asking permission. I should have left right then. I should have packed a bag and gone to Ruthie's house and never looked back. But I didn't, because Theodore apologized later that night. He brought me flowers and said he was sorry, that he'd been stressed, that it would never happen again. I believed him, because I was 25 years old and didn't know any better, because I loved him, because I'd been raised to believe that marriage was forever and you worked through problems. It happened again 2 weeks later, and again a month after that, and again and again and again. Over the next 35 years, Theodore beat me regularly. Sometimes it was a slap, sometimes a shove. Sometimes he'd grab me by the arms and shake me while screaming in my face. Sometimes he'd push me down and I'd hit furniture or walls. The abuse followed a pattern. Theodore would get angry about something. Dinner wasn't perfect. The house wasn't clean enough. I'd talked back or disrespected him. He'd hit me or push me. Then later he'd apologize and promise it wouldn't happen again. But it always happened again. I learned to walk on eggshells around Theodore. I learned to read his moods. I learned which topics would set him off and which ones were safe. I learned to make myself as small and quiet as possible. I also learned to hide the bruises. Long sleeves covered the finger marks on my arms. Makeup covered the occasional black eye or split lip. Excuses covered the times I limped from being pushed and hitting furniture. How did you get that bruise, Minnie? My sister Ruthie would ask. I'm so clumsy, I'd lie. I walked into the door frame. Again, Ruthie would say skeptically. I'm just getting old and not watching where I'm going, I'd insist. I don't know if Ruthie believed me, but she never pushed. Maybe she didn't want to know the truth. Maybe she didn't know how to help me if I admitted Theodore was hurting me. People always ask abuse victims, why didn't you just leave? As if leaving is simple, as if you can just walk out the door and start a new life. Here's why I stayed. Reason 1, financial dependence. Theodore controlled all our money. I didn't work outside the home. Theodore insisted I be a housewife. I had no income of my own, no savings account in my name, no way to support myself if I left. Reason 2, fear. Theodore always said if I ever tried to leave, he'd find me and make me regret it. I believed him. I'd seen how violent he could get when angry. I was afraid of what he'd do if I actually left. Reason 3, shame. I was ashamed that my marriage had turned into this. Ashamed that I'd let it happen. Ashamed that I stayed. I didn't want my family to know. I didn't want anyone to know. Reason 4. Hope part of me kept hoping Theodore would change. That he'd finally keep his promise to stop hitting me. That we could somehow have the marriage I dreamed of when we first got married. Reason 5. Age. As the years went by, it became harder to imagine starting over. At 30, I could have left and rebuilt my life. At 40, maybe, but at 50, 60, where would I go? How would I support myself? I'd been out of the workforce for decades. So I stayed, year after year after year. The abuse continued. And I survived by telling myself that tomorrow would be better, that Theodore would change, that I just needed to try harder to be a good wife. 5 years ago, when I was 63, I was diagnosed with early-stage osteoporosis. My bones were becoming brittle and more easily broken. "Mrs. Foster, you need to be very careful," my doctor said. "A fall or impact that wouldn't have hurt you 10 years ago could cause a fracture now. Avoid situations where you might get injured." I nodded, taking the prescription for calcium supplements. "Have you experienced any falls or impacts recently?" the doctor asked, looking at my chart. "I see you've had some bruising at previous appointments." "I'm just clumsy," I said automatically, repeating my standard lie. The doctor looked at me for a long moment. "Mrs. Foster, if you're experiencing any kind of abuse at home." "I'm not," I interrupted quickly. "I'm just clumsy, really." The doctor didn't look convinced, but didn't push further. She gave me information about resources for domestic violence victims and sent me home. I threw the domestic violence pamphlets in the trash before Theodore could see them. But the osteoporosis diagnosis worried me. I was 63 years old. My bones were fragile, and Theodore was still hitting me regularly. It was only a matter of time before he hit me hard enough to break something. 3 years ago, Theodore pushed me during an argument about dinner. I fell backward and hit my head on the corner of the kitchen counter. Everything went black for a moment. When I came to, I was on the floor with blood running down my face from a gash on my forehead. Theodore stood over me looking panicked. Minnie, are you okay?" I touched my forehead and my hand came away covered in blood. "I'm bleeding," I said, dazed. "It's not that bad," Theodore said, though he looked scared. "Let me get you a towel." He helped me to the bathroom and pressed a towel against my forehead. The cut was deep. It probably needed stitches. "We should go to the emergency room," I said. "No," Theodore said firmly. "You'll tell them I pushed you. They'll call the police. I'm not going to jail because you were clumsy." "But I need stitches," I started. "I'll bandage it," Theodore interrupted. "It'll be fine. You don't need to go to the hospital." Theodore butterfly bandaged the cut himself. It healed poorly, leaving a scar on my forehead that I still have today. That night, lying in bed with my head throbbing, I realized something. Theodore was going to eventually kill me. Maybe not intentionally. But one of these days, he was going to push me or hit me, and I was going to fall and hit my head wrong or break my hip and never recover, or suffer an injury that would prove fatal. I was 65 years old with brittle bones and a husband who'd been beating me for 35 years. If I didn't do something, I was going to die in this house. That's when I made my decision. I wasn't leaving. I was too old, too scared, too financially dependent. But I could document what Theodore was doing to me. I could gather evidence. And someday, somehow, I could use that evidence to get away from him. I just needed to be smart about it. Because if Theodore found out I was recording him, I didn't know what he'd do to me. The next day, when Theodore was at work, I went to an electronics store and bought 3 small hidden cameras. The salesperson, a young woman named Geneva, helped me pick out cameras that looked like everyday objects. "These are popular with people who want home security," Geneva explained, showing me a camera disguised as a tissue box, another as a phone charger, and a third as a smoke detector. "They record to SD cards?" I asked. "Yes, and you can also set them to upload to cloud storage automatically," Geneva said. "That way, even if the physical camera is destroyed, you still have the footage." "I'll take all 3, I said. "And can you show me how to set up the cloud storage?" Geneva spent an hour teaching me how to use the cameras, set up cloud accounts, and access the footage remotely. She was patient and kind, never asking why a 65-year-old woman needed hidden cameras. Maybe she knew. Maybe she'd seen enough abuse victims to recognize one. I paid in cash. Theodore monitored our credit card statements and would have questioned electronics purchases. That afternoon, I installed the cameras in our home. One in the living room disguised as a tissue box, one in the kitchen disguised as a phone charger, one in the bedroom disguised as a smoke detector. All 3 cameras recording 24 hours a day, uploading footage automatically to cloud accounts Theodore didn't know existed. I was terrified he'd notice them, but Theodore never paid attention to household items like tissue boxes or phone chargers. They blended into the background perfectly. The cameras captured everything. Every time Theodore yelled at me, every time he hit me, every time he pushed me or grabbed me or threatened me. For 3 years, I collected evidence. Hundreds of hours of footage showing the abuse I'd endured for nearly 4 decades. And Theodore had no idea. 2 months ago, Theodore pushed me so hard during an argument that I fell and broke my wrist. We went to the emergency room. It was impossible to hide a broken bone. "How did this happen?" the ER doctor asked. "I fell," I said automatically. "Mrs. Foster, you have significant bruising on your arms in addition to the broken wrist," the doctor said carefully. "Can you tell me how you got these bruises?" I looked at Theodore sitting in the corner of the exam room, his eyes warning me to keep my mouth shut. "I bruise easily," I said, "because of my osteoporosis." The doctor looked between Theodore and me. "Mrs. Foster, I'd like to speak with you privately." "That's not necessary," Theodore said quickly. "We're fine, just fix her wrist so we can go home." But the doctor insisted. She had Theodore leave the room and asked me directly, "Are you safe at home?" I wanted so badly to tell her the truth. To say no, I'm not safe. My husband has been beating me for 40 years, and I'm afraid he's going to kill me. But I looked at her young, concerned face and thought, what can she do? Call the police? Theodore will get arrested, probably post bail, come home even angrier and hurt me worse. Put me in a shelter. I'm 68 years old. I don't want to live in a shelter. "I'm safe," I lied. "I just fell, really." The doctor didn't believe me, but there was nothing she could do if I wouldn't admit the truth. She set my wrist, gave me a cast, and sent me home with more domestic violence resource information. That night, lying in bed with my broken wrist throbbing, I made a decision. I was filing for divorce. I'd spent 3 years collecting evidence. I had dozens of videos showing Theodore's abuse. I had medical records showing suspicious injuries. I had everything I needed to prove he'd been violent toward me for decades. It was time to use that evidence. It was time to get away from Theodore before he actually killed me. 6 weeks ago, I met with attorney Geneva Martinez, the same Geneva who'd helped me buy the hidden cameras 3 years earlier. When I'd purchased the cameras, Geneva had given me her business card and said, "If you ever need help, call me." I'd kept that card for 3 years. Now I was finally using it. "Mrs. Foster, tell me what's happening," Geneva said when I sat in her office. I told her everything. 45 years of marriage, 45 years of abuse, 3 years of secretly recording Theodore with hidden cameras. "I want a divorce," I said, "and I want to use the videos as evidence." Geneva reviewed some of the footage I'd brought on a USB drive. Her expression grew increasingly grim as she watched Theodore hitting me, yelling at me, pushing me. "Mrs. Foster, this is more than enough evidence for a divorce on grounds of domestic violence," Geneva said. "But I want you to understand, when we file these divorce papers and Theodore finds out about the videos, he's going to be very angry." "I know," I said. "We need to make sure you're safe," Geneva continued. "I'm going to recommend you file for a restraining order at the same time we file for divorce. And I think you should stay somewhere else, with family or friends, while this is proceeding." "My sister Ruthie lives 2 hours away," I said. "I can stay with her." "Good," Geneva said. Mrs. Foster, I'm going to be honest with you. Your husband is going to fight this divorce. He's going to claim the videos are fake or taken out of context. He's probably going to argue that you're elderly and confused. We need to be prepared for that. I'm prepared, I said firmly. I've lived with his abuse for 45 years. I'm done. Geneva filed the divorce papers the next day. Along with the divorce petition, we filed for a restraining order requiring Theodore to stay at least 100 yards away from me. Theodore was served with the papers at work. According to Geneva's process server, Theodore's reaction was shock followed by anger. He kept saying, "This is ridiculous, and my wife isn't in her right mind," the process server reported. That's when I knew Theodore truly believed I was too old and forgetful to fight back. He thought I'd just accepted the abuse as normal. He thought I'd forgotten or forgiven all the times he'd hurt me. He had no idea I had evidence. He had no idea about the cameras. He had no idea I'd been methodically building a case against him for 3 years. And he was about to find out in the worst possible way, on a courtroom screen, in front of a judge. Before I continue, kindly subscribe now. Hit that like button and turn on NOTIFICTONS. Drop a comment. Should Theodore go to jail? Was Minnie brave for recording him? Where are you watching from? United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Jamaica, Australia? Let me know. The courtroom remained silent as the video finished playing. Judge Opal Washington sat forward in her chair, her expression a mixture of shock and anger. Theodore sat at the defendant's table, his face pale and his hands shaking. "Your Honor," Theodore's attorney, Curtis Brooks, finally spoke, "my client would like to request a recess to consult with me about this. Unexpected evidence." "Unexpected?" Geneva, my attorney, said sharply. "The only thing unexpected here is that Mr. Foster actually got caught. He's been beating his wife for 45 years. The only difference now is that she has proof." "That's one video," Curtis argued weakly. "One incident that may have been." "We have 17 more videos," Geneva interrupted, "spanning 3 years, showing a clear pattern of physical, verbal, and emotional abuse. Would the court like to see them all?" Theodore's face went even paler. 17 videos. He was doing the math, trying to remember how many times he'd hit me in the past 3 years, trying to figure out how much evidence I had against him. "Your Honor, I think one video is sufficient for now," Judge Washington said. "Mr. Brooks, does your client wish to make a statement?" Curtis leaned over and whispered urgently with Theodore. I watched Theodore shaking his head, then nodding, then shaking his head again. He looked like a man realizing his entire strategy had just collapsed. Finally, Curtis stood. "Your Honor, my client maintains that this video does not represent the full context of their relationship." "Then he can explain the context," Judge Washington said firmly. "Mr. Foster, please stand." Theodore stood slowly, gripping the table for support. "Mr. Foster, I just watched you strike your wife in the face," Judge Washington said. "I heard you call her stupid and worthless. I saw you shove her against a wall. What context makes any of that acceptable?" She provoked me," Theodore said, his voice weak. "She provoked you," the judge repeated. "How?" "She burned dinner," Theodore said. "She's always burning dinner or forgetting things. She's getting old and forgetful and—" "So you hit her," the judge interrupted. "I didn't mean to," Theodore said quickly. "I just lost my temper. It was one time." "It wasn't one time," I heard myself say. My voice was quiet but steady. "It's been 45 years. Everyone in the courtroom turned to look at me. I'd been sitting silently beside Geneva, letting my attorney speak for me. But I couldn't stay silent anymore. "Mrs. Foster," Judge Washington said gently, "would you like to address the court?" I stood, my legs shaking. Geneva put a supportive hand on my arm. "Your Honor, my husband has been hitting me since 6 months after we got married," I said. "He's hit me, pushed me, shoved me, grabbed me, and screamed at me for 45 years. I stayed because I was afraid to leave, because I had no money of my own, because I thought I had nowhere to go." Theodore was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something between shock and fear. In 45 years, I'd never stood up to him like this. I'd never defended myself. I'd never fought back. 3 years ago, I started recording him with hidden cameras, I continued, because I knew he'd never stop unless I had proof. And I knew that if I tried to tell anyone what he'd been doing, he'd say I was old and confused and forgetful, that I was making it up or exaggerating. Your Honor, my client's wife is 68 years old, Curtis interrupted. She's admitted she's forgetful. Her testimony isn't reliable. I'm not forgetful, I said firmly, looking directly at Theodore. I remember every time you hit me, every bruise, every black eye, every broken bone. I remember all of it, and I recorded the most recent incidents so that you couldn't lie your way out of it anymore. Theodore looked away, unable to meet my eyes. Your Honor, Geneva said, we're prepared to present medical records showing injuries consistent with domestic violence spanning decades. We have testimony from family members and neighbors who witnessed Mrs. Foster's suspicious injuries. And we have 17 videos documenting recent abuse. The evidence is overwhelming. Judge Washington looked at Theodore with clear disgust. Mr. Foster, I'm granting the restraining order Mrs. Foster has requested. You are to stay at least 100 yards away from her at all times. You are not to contact her directly or indirectly. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Theodore said quietly. Additionally, Judge Washington continued, I'm ordering a continuance of this divorce hearing for 2 weeks. That will give both parties time to prepare their cases fully. But Mr. Foster, I want you to understand something. I take domestic violence very seriously. If even half of what Mrs. Foster is alleging is true, you're not only facing divorce, you're potentially facing criminal charges. Theodore's attorney stood quickly. Your Honor, my client hasn't been charged with any crime. Yet, Judge Washington said, but after seeing that video, I'm required to report suspected abuse to the authorities. The district attorney's office will be receiving a copy of today's proceedings. Theodore looked like he might faint. After the hearing ended, Geneva and I went to her office to discuss what had just happened. Minnie, you were incredible in there, Geneva said. Standing up and speaking your truth, that took tremendous courage. I didn't feel courageous, I admitted. I felt terrified, but I also felt angry. For 45 years, Theodore told me I was stupid and worthless and forgetful. And for 45 years, I believed him. But I'm not any of those things. I'm smart enough to have bought hidden cameras and recorded him. I'm competent enough to have saved all that evidence. I'm not the person Theodore said I was. No, you're not, Geneva agreed. Minnie, I need to prepare you for what's coming next. Theodore and his attorney are going to fight hard. They're going to try to discredit you and the videos. They're going to argue that you somehow edited or manipulated the footage. They're going to bring up your age and suggest you're not mentally competent. Let them try, I said. I have the original footage on the camera's SD cards. I have timestamps. I have cloud backups. I have medical records from the emergency room showing broken bones and injuries. I have 45 years of evidence. You do, Geneva confirmed. But Minnie, there's something else we need to discuss. The judge mentioned criminal charges. The district attorney might decide to prosecute Theodore for domestic violence. If that happens, you may be called to testify in a criminal trial. Good, I said firmly. Theodore should face criminal charges. What he did to me wasn't just grounds for divorce. It was assault. It was abuse. It was crimes. I agree, Geneva said. But I want you to be prepared. Criminal trials can be brutal. Defense attorneys will try to tear you apart on the witness stand. They'll question your memory, your motives, everything. I'm not afraid anymore, I said. For 45 years, I was afraid of Theodore, afraid of what he'd do to me if I spoke up. But I'm not afraid now. I have evidence. I have the truth. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows what he did. That evening, I was at my sister Ruthie's house, where I'd been staying since filing for divorce. My phone rang around 8 p.m. It was Theodore calling from a number I didn't recognize, probably because the restraining order prohibited him from contacting me. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, I listened to the message. Minnie, it's me, Theodore's voice said. He sounded desperate. "I know I'm not supposed to call you, but please, you have to talk to me. What you did in court today, playing that video, that was humiliating. Do you understand what you've done to me? Everyone is going to see me as some kind of monster." He paused, and I could hear him breathing heavily. "Minnie, we can fix this," Theodore continued. "Just tell them you made a mistake. Tell them the videos were taken out of context. Tell them you forgive me and you don't want a divorce. We can go back to how things were. I promise I'll be better. I'll never lay a hand on you again. Just please drop the divorce, please." The voicemail ended. I stared at my phone in disbelief. Theodore thought I would actually go back to him, after 45 years of abuse, after broken bones and black eyes and bruises, after being called stupid and worthless for decades. He actually thought I'd forgive him and go back. I saved the voicemail and forwarded it to Geneva. Theodore had just violated the restraining order by contacting me. That would be reported to the judge. 1 week after the court hearing, I received a call from the district attorney's office. An assistant DA named Porter Stevens wanted to meet with me about potential criminal charges against Theodore. "Mrs. Foster, I've reviewed the video that was played in your divorce hearing," Porter said when I met him at his office. "I've also reviewed the police reports and medical records your attorney provided. I believe we have grounds to charge your husband with multiple counts of domestic battery, assault, and terroristic threats." "What would that mean?" I asked. "If convicted, your husband could face significant prison time," Porter explained. "Domestic violence is a serious crime. The fact that this abuse occurred over decades makes it even more serious." "Will I have to testify?" I asked. "Yes," Porter confirmed. "In a criminal trial, you'd be the primary witness. The defense attorney would cross-examine you. I won't lie to you, Mrs. Foster. It would be difficult. But your video evidence is very powerful. Juries respond to visual proof." "I'll do it," I said without hesitation. "I'll testify. I want Theodore to face consequences for what he did." "Are you sure?" Porter asked gently. "You're already going through a divorce. Adding a criminal trial on top of that will be emotionally exhausting." "I'm sure," I said. "For 45 years, Theodore got away with hurting me because I was too afraid to tell anyone. I'm not afraid anymore. If testifying against him can prevent him from hurting someone else, then I'll do it." "All right," Porter said. "I'm going to move forward with filing charges. Your husband will be arrested and arraigned. I'll keep you informed every step of the way." 3 days later, Theodore was arrested at his workplace, just like my son Raymond had been arrested in the previous story. According to news reports, police showed up at the accounting firm where Theodore worked and took him out in handcuffs in front of his colleagues. Theodore was charged with 5 counts of domestic battery, 3 counts of assault, and 1 count of violating a restraining order for the phone call he'd made to me. His bail was set at $50,000. Theodore posted bail the same day. He had savings I didn't know about, apparently. But the arrest made the local news. "Prominent accountant charged with decades of domestic violence," the headline read. The story included a photo of Theodore being led away in handcuffs. Ruthie showed me the news article on her phone. "Minnie, everyone knows now," she said. "Good," I replied. "Let them know. Let everyone know what Theodore Foster really is." The day after Theodore's arrest, I started getting phone calls and messages from people I'd known for years. Some were supportive. "I always suspected something was wrong in your marriage. I'm so proud of you for speaking up." But others were judgmental. "Why did you stay with him for 45 years if he was so terrible? You must have been getting something out of it." And a few people, mostly friends of Theodore's from church, were hostile. "You're destroying that man's reputation over something that happened years ago. Why bring it up now? Why not just forgive him?" The hostile messages hurt, but I tried to remember what Geneva had told me. People who enable abusers will always blame the victim. It's easier for them to believe you're lying than to accept that someone they know is an abuser. One message particularly stung. It was from Estelle, a woman I'd been friends with for 30 years. "Minnie, I saw the news about Theodore. I can't believe you're doing this to him. He's a good man who made some mistakes. By dragging this into court and getting him arrested, you're ruining his life. Is that really what you want? After 45 years of marriage, this is how you repay him. I thought you were better than this. I'm very disappointed in you. I read the message twice, then deleted it. Estelle had been my friend for 3 decades. She'd seen my bruises over the years. She'd heard my excuses about being clumsy, and she'd chosen to believe the lies rather than ask difficult questions. Now she was disappointed in me for standing up to my abuser. I blocked her number. Theodore hired an expensive defense attorney, a man named Raymond Pierce, who specialized in defending people accused of domestic violence. Pierce immediately went on the offensive. He held a press conference outside the courthouse, claiming Theodore was the victim of a vindictive wife trying to take advantage of an elderly man. My client, Theodore Foster, is a 69-year-old retired accountant who's been married for 45 years, Pierce told reporters. His wife is seeking a divorce and making outrageous allegations of abuse that supposedly occurred decades ago. She's provided some videos that she claims show abuse, but we believe these videos have been edited and taken out of context. Mrs. Foster is 68 years old, Pierce continued. She's admitted in court that she has memory issues. We question whether she's mentally competent to make these accusations. We believe she's being manipulated by her attorney to make false claims in order to gain advantage in the divorce proceedings. I watched the press conference on the news, my hands shaking with anger. They're calling you senile and manipulated, Ruthie said, furious. How dare they? They're desperate, Geneva said. She'd come over to Ruthie's house to watch the press conference with us. They have no defense against the videos, so they're attacking your credibility instead. Don't worry, Minnie. We have medical records, witness testimony, and most importantly, we have 17 videos spanning 3 years. No jury is going to believe those videos are fake or edited. But what about the criminal trial? I asked. What if people believe I'm incompetent? Then we'll prove you're not, Geneva said firmly. Minnie, you're one of the sharpest people I know. You figured out how to buy hidden cameras, install them, set up cloud storage, and collect evidence for 3 years without your abuser finding out. That's not something an incompetent person could do. 2 weeks after the dramatic first hearing, we returned to court for the continuation of the divorce proceedings. This time, Theodore's attorney was ready. Your Honor, Curtis Brooks began, we're requesting the court order a competency evaluation of Mrs. Foster before proceeding with this divorce. We have serious concerns about her mental state and her ability to make informed decisions about this divorce. On what grounds? Judge Washington asked. Mrs. Foster is 68 years old, Curtis said. She's admitted to having memory issues. She's made claims about abuse that supposedly occurred over 45 years, decades ago. We question whether she's accurately remembering events or whether she's confusing normal marital disagreements with abuse. Your Honor, this is outrageous, Geneva objected. Mrs. Foster has provided 17 videos documenting recent abuse. She has medical records. She has witness testimony. Asking for a competency evaluation is a delay tactic designed to intimidate an abuse victim. Your Honor, we have the right to question the mental competency of someone making serious allegations against my client, Curtis argued. Judge Washington looked between the 2 attorneys, then at me. Mrs. Foster, how do you feel about a competency evaluation? The judge asked. I stood. Your Honor, I'll take any evaluation they want. I'll take 10 evaluations, because I know what they'll show. I'm perfectly competent. I'm not confused. I'm not forgetful. And I'm not being manipulated. I know exactly what my husband did to me for 45 years, and I have the evidence to prove it. Theodore wouldn't look at me. He sat at his table with his head down, probably hoping I'd be intimidated into backing down. Very well, Judge Washington said. I'm ordering a competency evaluation to be conducted by a court-appointed psychologist. Mrs. Foster, you'll undergo evaluation within the next week. We'll reconvene after the evaluation is complete. 3 days later, I met with Dr. Opal Green. a forensic psychologist appointed by the court to evaluate my mental competency. Dr. Green conducted a 3-hour evaluation. She asked me questions about current events, had me perform memory tests, asked about my medical history, and extensively discussed my allegations against Theodore. "Mrs. Foster, why do you think your husband's attorney is claiming you're not competent?" Dr. Green asked. "Because they have no other defense," I said. "They can't deny the videos exist. They can't explain away the medical records or the witness testimony. So their only option is to claim I'm senile and confused." "Are you senile or confused?" Dr. Green asked. "No," I said firmly. "I'm 68 years old, not 98. I'm in good mental health. My memory is fine. I remember what happened yesterday, last week, last year, and 45 years ago when my husband first hit me." Dr. Green made notes. "Walk me through how you decided to install hidden cameras in your home." I explained the entire process, researching cameras online, going to the electronics store, meeting Geneva who helped me pick out the right equipment, learning how to set up cloud storage, installing the cameras in locations where Theodore wouldn't notice them. "That's quite sophisticated for someone who supposedly has memory issues," Dr. Green observed. "I don't have memory issues," I said. "That's what Theodore wants people to believe. He spent 45 years telling me I'm stupid and forgetful. He convinced himself I actually was. He never imagined I was smart enough to document his abuse." Dr. Green smiled slightly. "Mrs. Foster, I think you're far more capable than your husband gave you credit for." 1 week later, we returned to court for Dr. Green's report. "Your Honor, I've completed my evaluation of Mrs. Minnie Foster," Dr. Green testified. "Based on extensive testing and interviews, I find Mrs. Foster to be fully competent. She scored well above average on all cognitive tests. Her memory is excellent. She shows no signs of dementia, confusion, or any mental impairment that would affect her ability to participate in these proceedings." Theodore's attorney looked devastated. Geneva looked triumphant. "Furthermore," Dr. Green continued, "Mrs. Foster demonstrated sophisticated planning and execution in documenting her allegations. She researched and purchased hidden cameras, installed them without detection, maintained them for 3 years, and preserved evidence in multiple formats including cloud storage. This level of planning is inconsistent with any claim of mental incompetence. In my professional opinion," Dr. Green concluded, "Mrs. Foster is a highly credible witness whose testimony should be given full weight by this court." Judge Washington turned to Curtis Brooks. "Mr. Brooks, do you have any questions for Dr. Green?" Curtis looked at his notes, then at Theodore, then back at the judge. "No, Your Honor." "Then let's proceed with this divorce hearing," Judge Washington said. "Mrs. Foster, I think it's time we heard your full testimony about your marriage to Mr. Foster." I stood, ready to tell my story, the story Theodore thought I'd forgotten or would be too scared to share. He was wrong on both counts. Before I continue, kindly subscribe now, smash that like button, and turn on notifications. Drop a comment. Should Theodore get prison time? Was recording him the right thing? Where are you watching from? After Dr. Green's competency evaluation proved I was fully capable of testifying, Judge Washington called for a 15-minute recess before I would give my full testimony. I sat in the hallway outside the courtroom with Geneva and my sister Ruthie. "Minnie, are you ready for this?" Geneva asked gently. "Once you start testifying, Theodore's attorney is going to try to discredit you. He's going to ask difficult questions about why you stayed, why you didn't report the abuse earlier, why you're coming forward now." "I'm ready," I said. "I've been preparing for this for 3 years. Ever since I installed those cameras, I knew this day would come." Ruthie squeezed my hand. "I'm so proud of you, sister. I wish I'd known what was happening all those years. I wish I'd helped you sooner." "You didn't know because I hid it well," I said. "That's what abuse victims do. We hide the truth because we're ashamed. But I'm not ashamed anymore." When we returned to the courtroom, Judge Washington called me to the witness stand. I was sworn in and sat down, looking out at the courtroom. Theodore sat at the defendant table, refusing to meet my eyes. His attorney Curtis Brooks sat beside him, notepad ready for cross-examination. "Mrs. Foster," Geneva began, "please tell the court about your marriage to Theodore Foster." I took a deep breath and began. "I met Theodore in 1980 when I was 23, I began. "He seemed wonderful, charming, attentive, kind. We dated for 6 months and then got married. For the first 6 months of marriage, everything was good." "When did the abuse start?" Geneva asked. 6 months after the wedding," I said. "I burned dinner one night. Theodore got angry, called me stupid, and threw the plate across the room. It shattered against the wall. I was shocked. I'd never seen him like that before." "What happened after that first incident?" Geneva asked. "Theodore apologized," I said. "He brought me flowers the next day and said it would never happen again. I believed him. But 3 months later, I went to lunch with my sister without telling him first. When I came home, he slapped me across the face. That was the first time he actually hit me." I saw some people in the courtroom gallery gasp. Theodore shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Did you consider leaving after he hit you?" Geneva asked. "I thought about it," I admitted. "But Theodore apologized again, and I was 25 years old. I'd been raised to believe that marriage was forever, that you worked through problems. I thought if I just tried harder to be a good wife, the violence would stop." "But it didn't stop," Geneva prompted. "No," I said. "It got worse. Theodore would get angry over small things. Dinner wasn't cooked right, the house wasn't clean enough, I didn't show him enough respect. And when he got angry, he'd hit me, or push me, or grab me and shake me while screaming in my face." "How often did this happen?" Geneva asked. "At least once a month," I said. "Sometimes more. There were months where he'd hit me every week. And between the physical violence, there was constant verbal abuse. He'd call me stupid, worthless, incompetent. He'd tell me I was lucky he stayed with me because no one else would want me." "Mrs. Foster, why didn't you leave?" Geneva asked the question I knew was coming. "Because I was afraid," I said simply. "Theodore controlled all our money. I didn't work. He insisted I be a housewife. I had no income, no savings of my own. If I left, I had nowhere to go and no way to support myself." "Were you afraid of anything else?" Geneva asked. "I was afraid Theodore would kill me if I tried to leave," I said. "He always said if I ever tried to leave him, he'd find me and make me regret it. I believed him. I'd seen how violent he could be when he was angry. I thought if I left, he'd hunt me down and hurt me worse than he'd ever hurt me before." "Did anyone know about the abuse?" Geneva asked. "No," I said. "I hid it. I wore long sleeves to cover bruises. I used makeup to hide black eyes. When people asked how I got injuries, I said I was clumsy. I was ashamed. I didn't want anyone to know my marriage was like this." "Mrs. Foster, did there come a point where you decided to document the abuse?" Geneva asked. "Yes," I said. 3 years ago, Theodore pushed me during an argument and I hit my head on the kitchen counter. I had a deep cut that should have had stitches, but Theodore refused to let me go to the hospital. He said I'd tell them he pushed me and he'd be arrested. So he bandaged it himself. I touched the scar on my forehead, still visible. "That night, I realized Theodore was eventually going to kill me," I continued. "Maybe not on purpose, but one of these days he was going to push me or hit me and I was going to fall wrong or hit my head or break something that wouldn't heal. I have osteoporosis. My bones are brittle. I couldn't survive much more abuse." "So what did you do?" Geneva asked. "I decided to document the abuse," I said. "I went to an electronics store and bought hidden cameras. I installed them in our home without Theodore knowing. For 3 years, those cameras recorded everything. Every time Theodore hit me, pushed me, yelled at me, called me names. I saved all the footage to the cloud so even if Theodore found the cameras, I'd still have the evidence." "Why did you decide to record the abuse instead of just leaving?" Geneva asked. "Because I knew if I tried to tell anyone what Theodore had done, he'd say I was old and confused," I said. "He'd say I was making it up or exaggerating. He'd spent 45 years telling me I was stupid and forgetful. I knew people might believe him instead of me. But with video evidence, there would be no denying what he'd done." Mrs. Foster, what finally made you decide to file for divorce? Geneva asked. 2 months ago, Theodore pushed me during an argument and I fell and broke my wrist, I said. We had to go to the emergency room. The doctor asked me how I'd been injured, and I lied like I always did. But after we got home, I realized I was 68 years old with a broken wrist from my husband pushing me. And I thought, how many more years am I going to live like this? My voice wavered, but I kept going. I'd spent 3 years collecting evidence, I continued. I had 17 videos showing Theodore's abuse. I had medical records from emergency room visits. I had everything I needed to prove what he'd done. It was time to use that evidence. It was time to get away from him before he actually killed me. So you filed for divorce, Geneva prompted. Yes, I confirmed. I met with you, showed you the videos, and filed for divorce 6 weeks ago. I also filed for a restraining order because I was afraid of how Theodore would react when he found out. And how did Theodore react? Geneva asked. He called me from a blocked number even though the restraining order prohibited contact, I said. He left a voicemail saying I'd humiliated him and asking me to drop the divorce. He said we could go back to how things were and he promised he'd never hit me again. Did you believe him? Geneva asked. No, I said firmly. Theodore has promised to stop hitting me hundreds of times over 45 years. He's never kept that promise. I don't believe he'd keep it now. Geneva walked back to her table and picked up a folder. Mrs. Foster, I'd like to show you some photographs. Can you identify these? She showed me photos of my bruises from over the years. Photos I'd taken secretly and saved to document the abuse. Photos of black eyes, split lips, bruises on my arms where Theodore had grabbed me. Those are photos of injuries Theodore gave me, I said. And these. Geneva showed me copies of medical records from emergency room visits. Those are records from times Theodore hurt me badly enough that I had to go to the hospital, I said. The broken wrist 2 months ago. A broken rib 3 years ago when he shoved me into a table. A concussion 5 years ago when he pushed me and I hit my head. Geneva entered all the photos and medical records into evidence. Mrs. Foster, is there anything else you'd like to tell the court? Geneva asked. I looked at Theodore for the first time since I'd started testifying. He was staring at the table, his face pale. Your Honor, Theodore Foster beat me for 45 years, I said, my voice steady. He broke my bones. He gave me black eyes and bruises and cuts. He called me stupid and worthless and made me believe I deserved the abuse. For decades, I stayed because I was afraid and ashamed and had nowhere to go. But 3 years ago, I decided to fight back, I continued. Not by leaving, I wasn't brave enough for that yet, but by documenting the truth. By recording what Theodore did to me so that someday, when I was finally ready to leave, I'd have proof. Theodore thought I'd forgotten the beatings. He thought I was too old and senile to remember or to fight back. He was wrong. I looked directly at Theodore. I remember every single time you hit me, every bruise, every broken bone, every degrading name you called me. I remember all of it, and now everyone else knows too. Theodore finally looked up at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes: defeat. He knew he'd lost. The videos, the photos, the medical records, my testimony. It was overwhelming evidence that he couldn't deny or explain away. Geneva finished her questions and sat down. Now it was time for Theodore's attorney to cross-examine me. Curtis Brooks stood and approached the witness stand. He had a sympathetic expression on his face. Clearly his strategy was to appear reasonable and concerned rather than aggressive. Mrs. Foster, I'm sorry for what you say you've experienced, Curtis began, but I need to ask you some difficult questions. Go ahead, I said. You testified that the abuse began 45 years ago, Curtis said. But you have no evidence of abuse from that time period, correct? No photos, no medical records, no police reports. That's correct, I admitted. I didn't document the abuse back then because I was ashamed. I hid it from everyone. So we only have your word that abuse occurred 45 years ago, Curtis said. We have no way to verify your claims about events from decades ago. The videos from the past 3 years show a pattern of abuse, I said. Why would Theodore suddenly start being violent 3 years ago? The logical explanation is that the abuse has been ongoing for decades, and I finally decided to document it. Or, Curtis suggested, the logical explanation is that you and your husband had some marital disagreements in recent years that you've now decided to characterize as abuse in order to gain advantage in a divorce. Those weren't disagreements, I said firmly. Theodore hitting me across the face isn't a disagreement. Theodore shoving me into a wall isn't a disagreement. That's assault. That's abuse. Mrs. Foster, you testified that you stayed with your husband for 45 years, Curtis continued. You chose to stay even though you say he was abusing you. Why should this court believe the abuse was as serious as you claim if you willingly stayed for over 4 decades? I felt my anger rising. This was victim blaming, pure and simple. I stayed because I was afraid, I said. I stayed because Theodore controlled all the money. I stayed because he threatened to kill me if I left. I stayed because I was ashamed and thought the abuse was my fault. There are hundreds of reasons abuse victims stay with their abusers. That doesn't mean the abuse didn't happen. But Mrs. Foster, if the abuse was truly as severe as you claim, wouldn't you have sought help? Curtis pressed. Wouldn't you have gone to the police or to a shelter or told family members? I was terrified, I said. Theodore convinced me that no one would believe me, that I had nowhere to go, that I deserved the abuse. When you're living with domestic violence, you don't think clearly. You survive day by day. You do what you think you need to do to stay alive. Mrs. Foster, you're 68 years old, Curtis said, changing tactics. At your age, memory can be unreliable. Is it possible you're misremembering events from decades ago, perhaps exaggerating normal marital conflicts? I have videos, I said flatly. 17 videos showing Theodore hitting me, pushing me, verbally abusing me. Those aren't memories. Those are facts, recorded and preserved. And a court-appointed psychologist evaluated me and found I'm fully competent with excellent memory. So no, I'm not misremembering anything. Curtis looked at his notes, searching for another angle of attack. Mrs. Foster, you installed hidden cameras in your home without your husband's knowledge, Curtis said. In this state, recording someone without their consent can be illegal. Did you know you might have been breaking the law? I knew, I said. But this is my home too. I have a right to record what happens in my own home. And even if it was illegal, I'd rather break a recording law than let my husband continue beating me without consequences. Mrs. Foster, isn't it true that you've been planning this divorce for 3 years? Curtis asked. That you've been carefully documenting and collecting evidence specifically to use against your husband in divorce proceedings? Yes, I said, because I knew Theodore would lie about the abuse. I knew he'd say I was making it up or that I was confused. I needed proof, so I collected it. And during those 3 years, you continued living with your husband, continued acting like nothing was wrong, Curtis asked. I had to, I said. If Theodore had known I was documenting his abuse, he would have found the cameras and destroyed the evidence. I had to pretend everything was normal while I collected proof of what he was doing to me. Curtis tried several more questions, but I had answers for all of them. Finally, he gave up. No further questions, Curtis said, returning to his table. After my testimony, it was Theodore's turn to take the witness stand. His attorney called him to testify in his own defense. Mr. Foster, please tell the court about your marriage to Mrs. Foster, Curtis began. Theodore cleared his throat nervously. We've been married for 45 years. For most of that time, we've had a good marriage. We've had our disagreements like any couple, but nothing serious. Mr. Foster, your wife has accused you of domestic violence spanning decades, Curtis said. How do you respond to those accusations? They're exaggerated, Theodore said. Minnie and I have had arguments. Sometimes those arguments got heated. Maybe I raised my voice. Maybe I said things I shouldn't have, but I never seriously hurt her. Mr. Foster, we've seen a video showing you striking your wife, Curtis said. How do you explain that? That video was taken out of context, Theodore said. Minnie had been provoking me all day. She deliberately burned dinner even though she knows how important it is to me to have a good meal after work. When I reacted in frustration, she happened to have the camera running. So you're saying your wife deliberately provoked you and then recorded your reaction? Curtis asked. Yes, Theodore said. I think she's been planning this divorce for years and has been setting me up to look bad. I watched Theodore lie under oath and felt nothing but disgust. Even now, caught on video, he was trying to blame me for his violence. When Curtis finished his questions, Geneva stood for cross-examination. Mr. Foster, you just testified that the video was taken out of context, Geneva said. Would you like to explain what context makes it acceptable to slap your wife across the face? Theodore stammered. I didn't mean to hit her that hard. It was more of a tap. A tap, Geneva repeated. Mr. Foster, the video shows you striking your wife with enough force to make her cry out in pain. That's not a tap. She exaggerated her reaction, Theodore claimed. Mr. Foster, we have 17 videos, Geneva said, spanning 3 years, showing multiple instances of you hitting, pushing, and verbally abusing your wife. Are all 17 videos taken out of context? I don't know, Theodore said weakly. I haven't seen all of them. Would you like to? Geneva asked. Because we can play all 17 videos right now if you'd like to explain the context for each one. That won't be necessary, Curtis interjected. Mr. Foster, you testified that you and your wife had a good marriage for most of 45 years, Geneva continued. Is breaking your wife's wrist part of a good marriage? That was an accident, Theodore said. An accident, Geneva repeated. Mr. Foster, you pushed your wife during an argument and she fell and broke her wrist. How is that an accident? I didn't mean for her to get hurt, Theodore said. But you did mean to push her, Geneva pressed. I was frustrated, Theodore said. So when you're frustrated with your wife, you push her, Geneva asked. Sometimes, Theodore admitted, then realized how bad that sounded. I mean, not often, rarely. Mr. Foster, your wife has medical records showing a broken rib, a concussion, a broken wrist, and multiple other injuries over the past decade, Geneva said. Are all of those injuries accidents? She's clumsy, Theodore tried. She's clumsy, Geneva repeated skeptically. Mr. Foster, isn't it true that your wife's injuries came from you hitting her and pushing her? No, Theodore said, but he didn't sound convincing. Geneva walked to her table and picked up a stack of papers. Mr. Foster, I have 17 videos, 32 photographs of injuries, 12 medical records, and testimony from 3 emergency room doctors who treated your wife for suspicious injuries. Are you really going to sit here and tell this court that all of that evidence is fake or misinterpreted? Theodore looked at his attorney desperately, but Curtis had no help to offer. I may have lost my temper a few times, Theodore finally admitted. But Minnie is exaggerating how often it happened and how serious it was. Mr. Foster, your wife had to install hidden cameras in her own home to document your abuse because she knew you'd deny it, Geneva said. She spent 3 years collecting evidence because she knew people wouldn't believe her without proof. And now, faced with overwhelming evidence of your violence, you're still denying it. Do you understand how that makes you look? Theodore had no answer. No further questions, Geneva said, returning to her seat. After both sides had presented their evidence and testimony, Judge Washington called for a short recess to review everything before making her ruling. When we reconvened, the judge's expression was stern. I've reviewed all the evidence in this case, Judge Washington began. The videos, the photographs, the medical records, the testimony from both parties, and I have reached a decision. Theodore looked nervous. I sat calmly beside Geneva, knowing the evidence was overwhelmingly in my favor. Mr. Foster, I find your testimony completely unbelievable, Judge Washington said bluntly. You claim the videos are taken out of context, but I watched those videos. There is no context in which striking your spouse across the face is acceptable. There is no context in which shoving your spouse into a wall is justified. Theodore's face went red. Furthermore, Judge Washington continued. Mrs. Foster's testimony was credible, detailed, and supported by extensive evidence. The medical records alone tell a story of repeated suspicious injuries over many years. Combined with the video evidence and photographic evidence, the pattern is clear. You have been abusing your wife for decades. I am granting Mrs. Foster's petition for divorce, Judge Washington announced. The divorce is granted on grounds of domestic violence. Additionally, the restraining order against you, Mr. Foster, is made permanent. You are to have no contact with Mrs. Foster for the rest of her life. Theodore slumped in his chair, defeated. Regarding the division of marital assets, Judge Washington continued, normally assets would be split 50-50. However, in cases of domestic violence, I have discretion to award the innocent spouse a larger share. Mrs. Foster spent 45 years in an abusive marriage, suffering physical and psychological harm. I am awarding her 70% of all marital assets, including the house, savings, and retirement accounts. Theodore's attorney started to object, but Judge Washington held up her hand. I'm not finished, the judge said. Mr. Foster, I am also ordering you to pay for all of Mrs. Foster's legal fees and medical expenses related to treating injuries you caused. That amount will be determined at a later hearing, but I estimate it will be substantial. Finally, Judge Washington said, I am referring this case to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution. Mr. Foster, you should expect to face criminal charges for domestic violence. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down. I sat there feeling a mix of emotions: relief, vindication, exhaustion, and a tiny bit of sadness for the 45 years I'd lost to Theodore's abuse. But mostly, I felt free. Before I continue, kindly subscribe now, smash that like button, and turn on notifications. Drop a comment. Was the 70-30 split fair? Should Theodore go to prison? Where are you watching from? 6 months after Judge Washington granted my divorce and awarded me 70% of our marital assets, I'm 69 years old and living my best life, free from Theodore Foster for the first time in 45 years. Theodore is currently awaiting trial on criminal domestic violence charges. He's been indicted on 12 counts of domestic battery, 5 counts of assault, and 2 counts of violating the restraining order. If convicted on all counts, he could face up to 20 years in prison. But this final chapter isn't really about Theodore and his consequences. It's about me, about how I rebuilt my life after escaping 4.5 decades of abuse, and about the message I want other abuse victims to hear. 1 week after the divorce was finalized, I moved into a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment across town. It was the first time in 45 years I'd lived somewhere Theodore didn't know the address. My sister Ruthie helped me move in. We spent the day unpacking boxes, hanging pictures, and turning the empty apartment into a home. Minnie, how does it feel? Ruthie asked as we sat on my new couch, exhausted but satisfied with our work. It feels quiet, I said. Good quiet, peaceful quiet, no walking on eggshells, no worrying about saying the wrong thing or burning dinner. Just quiet. You deserve this, Ruthie said, squeezing my hand. You deserve peace after what you went through. I should have left 40 years ago, I said, a familiar guilt creeping in. Stop, Ruthie said firmly. You left when you were ready. You left when you had the evidence and resources you needed. You left, Minnie. That's what matters. She was right. I couldn't change the past. I could only move forward. 1 month after the divorce, Theodore was arrested on the criminal domestic violence charges. According to news reports, he was taken into custody at his apartment and held on $100,000 bail. Theodore's elderly mother posted his bail. Apparently, she'd mortgaged her house to get the money. Theodore was released pending trial, but with strict conditions: GPS monitoring, no alcohol, mandatory anger management classes, and absolutely no contact with me. The local news covered the arrest. Retired accountant faces 20 years for decades of spousal abuse, the headline read. The article included details about the hidden camera videos and my testimony in divorce court. Geneva called me after the arrest. "Minnie, how are you feeling about this?" "Conflicted," I admitted. Part of me is glad Theodore is facing consequences, but part of me feels guilty. His mother had to mortgage her house to bail him out. He's lost his reputation. His whole life is falling apart. "Minnie, Theodore's life is falling apart because of choices he made," Geneva said firmly. "He chose to beat his wife for 45 years. He chose to lie about it when confronted. He chose to continue denying it even when faced with video evidence. Those were his choices, not yours." "I know," I said, "but 45 years of conditioning doesn't disappear overnight. Part of me still feels responsible for his problems." "That's the abuse talking," Geneva said. "Theodore spent decades making you believe everything was your fault. It's going to take time to fully internalize that his actions and their consequences are not your responsibility." 2 months after the divorce, I started seeing a therapist who specialized in domestic violence survivors. Her name was Dr. Opal Turner, and she helped me process 45 years of trauma. "Minnie, tell me about your relationship with Theodore in the beginning," Dr. Turner said during one session. "He was charming," I said. "Attentive, he made me feel special. But looking back now with what I know about abuse, I can see the warning signs I missed." "Like what?" Dr. Turner asked. "He was possessive," I said. "Even when we were dating, he didn't like me spending time with friends without him. He wanted to know where I was all the time. I thought it meant he loved me. Now I know it was about control." "That's very insightful," Dr. Turner said. "What else do you see now that you didn't see then?" "He isolated me," I said. "After we got married, he gradually cut me off from my friends and family. He'd get angry if I made plans without him. He'd criticize my friends and family until I stopped seeing them. By the time the physical abuse started, I was already isolated and dependent on him." "Isolation is a classic abuse tactic," Dr. Turner confirmed. "It makes victims feel like they have nowhere to turn." Over the following months, therapy helped me understand the dynamics of abuse, how Theodore had used intimidation, isolation, emotional abuse, and financial control to keep me trapped for decades. But therapy also helped me recognize my own strength. "Minnie, you survived 45 years of abuse," Dr. Turner said. "Many people don't survive that long. You found ways to cope, to survive, to protect yourself as much as you could. That takes incredible resilience." "I don't feel resilient," I admitted. "I feel like I wasted 45 years. "You didn't waste them," Dr. Turner said gently. "You survived them. And then when you were ready, you found a way to escape. You bought hidden cameras. You documented the abuse for 3 years. You gathered evidence. You found an attorney. You filed for divorce. You testified in court. You fought back, Minnie. That's not wasting your life, that's reclaiming it." 3 months after the divorce, I reconnected with family members I'd been estranged from for years. Theodore had isolated me so effectively that I'd lost touch with cousins, nieces, nephews, people I used to be close to. "Minnie, I'm so sorry we lost touch," my niece Estelle said when she visited. "I didn't know what you were going through." "I hid it well," I said. "Theodore was always charming in public. Nobody knew what he was like behind closed doors." "I wish I'd known," Estelle said. "I wish I could have helped you sooner." "You're helping me now," I said. "That's what matters." Estelle and I spent the afternoon looking at old family photos. Photos from before I married Theodore, when I was young and smiling, and full of hope for the future. "You look so happy in these photos," Estelle observed. "So free." "I was," I said. "I'd forgotten what that felt like, but I'm starting to remember." 4 months after the divorce, Theodore's criminal defense attorney contacted Geneva with a plea offer. "The prosecution has offered Theodore a plea deal," Geneva told me over the phone. "If he pleads guilty to 5 counts of domestic battery, the other charges will be dropped, and he'll be sentenced to 7 years in prison with possibility of parole after 5. "What happens if he doesn't take the plea?" I asked. "Then it goes to trial," Geneva said. "The prosecutor would seek the maximum sentence on all charges, which could be up to 20 years. But trials are unpredictable. A jury could convict him of everything, or they could acquit him, or something in between. "What do you think I should do?" I asked. "This is entirely your decision," Geneva said. "But Minnie, if Theodore goes to trial, you'll have to testify again. The defense attorney will cross-examine you. It will be emotionally draining. The plea deal guarantees Theodore goes to prison without putting you through a trial." "Will they ask my opinion?" I asked. "The prosecutor will want to know your thoughts before advising Theodore to accept or reject the plea," Geneva said. I thought about it for a long time. 7 years in prison seemed like a lot. Theodore would be 76 when he got out, assuming he made parole after 5 years. But it also seemed like not enough for 45 years of abuse. "Tell them I support the plea deal," I finally said. "I don't want to go through a trial. I just want this to be over so I can move on with my life." Theodore accepted the plea deal 1 week later. He pleaded guilty to 5 counts of domestic battery and was sentenced to 7 years in state prison with eligibility for parole after 5 years. I didn't attend the sentencing hearing. I didn't need to see Theodore one more time. I'd said everything I needed to say in divorce court. Now I just wanted to be done with him. 6 months after the divorce, I was contacted by a local domestic violence shelter asking if I'd be willing to speak at their fundraising event. "Mrs. Foster, your story has inspired a lot of abuse survivors," the shelter director said. "Many women have reached out to us saying that hearing about how you documented your abuse and escaped gave them hope that they could do the same. Would you be willing to share your story at our annual fundraiser?" I was terrified of public speaking, but I also felt like I had an obligation to help other women who were going through what I'd been through. "I'll do it," I said. The fundraiser was held at a local hotel ballroom with about 200 people in attendance. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the podium with shaking hands and looked out at the audience. "My name is Minnie Foster," I began, "and for 45 years my husband beat me." I told my story, the whole story, from the first slap to the hidden cameras to the courtroom confrontation. I talked about why I stayed, why I finally left, and what I'd learned about abuse and survival. "If you're in an abusive relationship, please know this: it's not your fault," I said, looking directly at the women in the audience. "Your abuser will tell you it's your fault. He'll say you provoked him. He'll say you deserved it. He'll say if you were a better wife or girlfriend, he wouldn't have to hurt you. Those are lies. The abuse is not about you," I continued. "It's about him and his need to control you. And no matter how much you change or how hard you try, the abuse won't stop until you leave or he decides to change. And most abusers never change. I also want you to know it's never too late to leave," I said. "I was 68 years old when I finally escaped. I'd been with my abuser for 45 years. I thought it was too late for me, too old, too dependent, too trapped. But I found a way out. If I can do it at 68 after 45 years of abuse, you can do it too. Document the abuse if you can," I advised. "Take photos of your injuries. Save threatening text messages or voicemails. If it's safe to do so, record the abuse with your phone or hidden cameras. Evidence is powerful. It's hard for abusers to deny what they've done when there's video proof. But most importantly, reach out for help," I concluded. "Call a domestic violence hotline, go to a shelter. Tell a friend or family member you don't have to escape alone. There are people who want to help you, organizations like this shelter that will support you. You deserve to live without fear. You deserve to be safe. And you deserve to be free." When I finished speaking, the audience gave me a standing ovation. Several women approached me afterward with tears in their eyes. "Thank you for sharing your story," one woman said. "I've been with my boyfriend for 10 years and he's been hitting me for 8 of those years. Hearing your story makes me think I can actually leave." "You can," I told her. "It's scary and it's hard, but you can do it. Please reach out to the shelter, they'll help you." Another woman, probably in her 70s, hugged me and whispered, "I've been with my husband for 52 years. I thought I was the only elderly woman still dealing with abuse. Thank you for showing me I'm not alone." That's when I realized my story mattered. Not just for me, but for other women who needed to know they weren't alone, that it wasn't too late, that escape was possible. 1 year after my divorce from Theodore, I'm 69 years old and living a life I never imagined possible during those 45 years of abuse. I live in my own apartment. I have my own money, 70% of the marital assets that Judge Washington awarded me. I have full control over my life for the first time since I was 24 years old. I've reconnected with family members I'd lost touch with. I've made new friends through the domestic violence shelter where I now volunteer. I've started hobbies I gave up decades ago because Theodore didn't approve of them: painting, reading, gardening. I take walks without worrying that I'm going to come home to an angry husband demanding to know where I've been. I cook dinner without fear that I'll burn something and get hit. I wake up every morning without that tight knot of anxiety in my stomach, wondering what mood Theodore will be in. I'm free. Theodore is currently in year 1 of his 7-year prison sentence. According to updates from the Department of Corrections, he's in a minimum security facility serving his time quietly. He'll be eligible for parole in 4 years when he's 74 years old. I have a permanent restraining order against him. When he's released from prison, he's prohibited from contacting me or coming within 500 yards of me for the rest of my life. If he violates that order, he goes right back to prison. I don't think about Theodore much anymore. Occasionally, something will trigger a memory, a smell, a song, a phrase, and I'll remember the fear I lived with for so long. But those moments are becoming less frequent. Mostly, I think about the future, about the years I have left and how I want to spend them, about the women I can help through my advocacy work, about the life I'm building for myself, a life based on freedom, peace, and self-determination rather than fear and control. If you're reading this story and you're in an abusive relationship, I want you to know something. Your abuser is counting on you to stay silent. He's counting on you feeling too ashamed to tell anyone, too afraid to leave, too dependent to support yourself, too convinced that the abuse is your fault to seek help. Your abuser wants you to believe you're weak, that you're stupid, that you're worthless, that no one else would want you, that you deserve the abuse, that things will get better if you just try harder. Those are all lies. You are not weak. You're strong enough to survive abuse. You are not stupid. You're smart enough to recognize that something is wrong. You are not worthless. You deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. Other people would want you. You are worthy of love that doesn't hurt. You do not deserve abuse. No one ever deserves to be hurt by someone who claims to love them. And things will not get better. Abusers rarely change without serious intervention, and you cannot love someone into treating you well. Here's what I learned from my 45 years in an abusive marriage. Lesson 1: abuse is about power and control, not anger. Theodore didn't hit me because I burned dinner or talked back or failed to be a good wife. He hit me because he wanted power over me. The specific reasons he gave for the abuse changed, but the underlying motive was always the same: control. Lesson 2: you cannot change your abuser. I spent decades trying to be the perfect wife, thinking if I just did everything right, Theodore would stop hurting me. But the abuse continued no matter what I did. That's because the problem was never me, it was him, and I couldn't fix him. Lesson 3: leaving is possible even when it seems impossible. I thought I was too old, too dependent, too trapped to ever escape. But I found a way. If you're creative and determined, you can find a way too. It might take time. It might require careful planning, but escape is possible. Lesson 4: evidence is powerful. Those hidden cameras I installed changed everything. Theodore could deny the abuse when it was just my word against his, but he couldn't deny video evidence. If you can safely document the abuse, through photos, videos, text messages, medical records, do it. That evidence could save your life. Lesson 5: it's never too late. I escaped at 68 after 45 years of abuse. If I can do it at my age after that long, you can do it too. Don't let anyone tell you it's too late or you've been in the relationship too long or you're too old to start over. It's never too late to choose freedom. Lesson 6: you are not alone. When I was going through the abuse, I felt completely isolated. I thought no one would understand or believe me. But after I came forward, I discovered there were thousands of other women going through the same thing. You are not alone. There are people who will believe you, support you, and help you escape. I'm Minnie Foster, 69 years old, and my husband thought I'd forgotten the beatings. He thought after 45 years of abuse, I was too broken, too forgetful, too defeated to fight back. He was wrong. I remembered every single incident of violence, every slap, every punch, every shove, every degrading name he called me. I remembered it all. And for 3 years, I documented it. I installed hidden cameras in my home and recorded Theodore's abuse, 17 videos spanning 3 years, showing a clear pattern of domestic violence. Then I filed for divorce. I got a restraining order. I testified in court about 45 years of abuse. And the next day, after Theodore confidently claimed in court that I was confused and had no proof, I played the videos. I watched Theodore's face turn pale as he saw himself on that courtroom screen, saw undeniable proof of his violence. I watched his attorney scramble for explanations that didn't exist. I watched the judge rule in my favor, awarding me 70% of our marital assets and granting me a divorce on grounds of domestic violence. I watched Theodore get arrested on criminal charges and ultimately sentenced to 7 years in prison. And I walked out of that courtroom free for the first time in 45 years. My husband thought I forgot the beatings, but I didn't forget. I documented them, and I used that documentation to escape, to get justice, and to reclaim my life. If you're in an abusive relationship, please know you can escape. You can document the abuse. You can file for divorce or press charges. You can reclaim your life. It's scary and it's hard, but it's possible. I did it at 68 after 45 years. You can do it too. Your abuser is counting on you to stay silent. Don't give him what he wants. Speak up. Reach out. Document. Escape. And live the life you deserve. A life free from fear, violence, and control. You are stronger than your abuser tells you. You are smarter than he says you are. You are worthy of love that doesn't hurt. And you can survive this. I'm proof. My husband thought I forgot the beatings. The next day, I played the video in court and changed my entire future. You can change yours too. 1 year later, MINNIE thriving in freedom. 6 months after divorce at 69, living best life, free from Theodore for first time in 45 years. Theodore currently in year 1 of 7-year prison sentence, indicted on 12 counts domestic battery, 5 counts assault, 2 counts violating restraining order. Could face 20 years if convicted all counts. 1 week after divorce, Minnie moved into beautiful 2-bedroom apartment across town. First time in 45 years Theodore didn't know her address. Sister Ruthie helped move. How does it feel? Ruthie asked. Quiet, good quiet, peaceful quiet. No walking eggshells, no worrying about saying wrong thing or burning dinner, just quiet. You deserve peace after what went through. Should have left 40 years ago, feeling guilty. This story proves that it's never too late to escape abuse, even at 68 after 45 years. Documenting abuse with hidden cameras can save your life. Video evidence is powerful. Abusers can't deny visual proof. Courts take domestic violence seriously when given evidence. Abusers face real consequences, divorce settlements, and prison. Freedom after abuse is possible and worth fighting for. Your story can help other survivors escape. You're stronger than your abuser says you are. If this story inspired you, please subscribe to this channel for more survivor stories. Smash that like button. Turn on notifications for new content. Drop a comment. Would you have documented the abuse? Is 7 years enough punishment? Where are you watching from? United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Jamaica, South Africa, Australia, Trinidad, India, Philippines? Let me know. Remember, if you're being abused, document it. Take photos, save texts, record incidents if safe. Hidden cameras available online. Evidence gives you power in court. Don't suffer in silence. Call hotline, tell someone, make plan. You deserve to be safe. It's never too late to leave. Age doesn't matter. Minnie escaped at 68. You can too. Your abuser wants you silent. Speak up, reach out, escape, live free. Minnie's husband beat her 45 years, thought she forgot. She documented everything with hidden cameras for 3 years. Next day in court, played 17 videos showing abuse. Theodore sentenced 7 years prison. Minnie awarded 70% assets, permanent restraining order. 1 year later, thriving in freedom, helping other survivors. Proved it's never too late to escape. Thank you for following this powerful journey from abuse to documentation to courtroom justice to complete freedom. Until the next story, if you're suffering, document and escape. You deserve safety and peace.